The creaking of old wood echoed through the cabin as Michael Anderson fed the fireplace with a few more logs. The crackling fire was his only company on this freezing winter night in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. The antique furniture silent, witnesses to a life that no longer existed, cast dancing shadows on the rustic walls. The aroma of coffee still lingered in the air, a ritual he religiously maintained every morning, as if each cup could bring back a fragment of Sarah. Snow fell incessantly outside, accumulating on the windowsills and transforming the landscape into a silent white sea. Michael gazed through the foggy glass, lost in thought, when a peculiar sound cut through the quietude of the night. First, there were soft scratches on the solid wooden door, followed by a low, guttural whimper that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. His first instinct was to ignore it. Years of voluntary isolation had taught him that sometimes the wind played tricks on the lonely mind. But the sound persisted, now more insistent, as if begging for attention. With a resigned sigh, Michael rose from his favorite armchair, the one that still held the shape of Sarah's body, and walked hesitantly to the door. The cutting wind invaded the room as soon as he turned the doorknob, bringing with it snowflakes that danced in the air before melting on the wooden floor. It was then that he saw them, two majestic wolves, their thick fur covered by a thin layer of crystalline snow, their amber eyes shining in the twilight like wild lanterns. They were larger than any wolf he had ever seen in the region, and something in their posture emanated an intriguing mixture of strength and vulnerability. Michael remained motionless, his heart beating in an uneven rhythm. Years ago, Sarah always said that the wolves of the mountains had an ancient wisdom, that they could see into people's souls. "They know who deserves trust," she used to say with that serene smile that enchanted him so much. Now, facing the penetrating gaze of these creatures, her words echoed in his mind with frightening clarity. Against all common sense, Michael took a step to the side, opening a passage. The wolves didn't hesitate. With surprising elegance, they entered the warm environment, their paws leaving damp footprints on the floorboards. They headed directly to the fireplace, as if they knew the place, and settled near the fire, their bodies visibly relaxing with the heat. The scene was surreal. Michael closed the door and returned to his armchair, not taking his eyes off the unexpected visitors. The larger wolf, with darker fur, kept its eyes fixed on him as if studying him. The other, slightly smaller and with silver patches in its fur, had already fallen asleep, its body rising and falling in peaceful breathing. As he observed this unlikely scene, Michael felt something stir inside him, as if a long-locked door was beginning to open. It was as if Sarah was there, whispering in his ear that not everything was lost, that there was still magic in the world. The warmth of the fire, the soft sound of the wolves breathing, and the distant howl of the wind began to mix, creating a symphony he hadn't heard in a long time. Without realizing it, Michael also began to relax. His eyes grew heavy, and for the first time in years he didn't fight against the sleep that was coming. He fell asleep right there in the armchair, lulled by a strange feeling of security and belonging. His last conscious thought was of Sarah and her old wisdom about the mountain wolves. Maybe she was right after all. Maybe those animals really could see beyond appearances, beyond the masks that people wore. The snow continued to fall outside, covering the world with its white mantle. But inside the cabin, something had changed. The silence was no longer empty, and loneliness, for the first time in a long time, began to give way to a presence that Michael didn't yet fully understand, but which somehow seemed to have come to stay. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll continue. Dawn arrived slowly, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold. Michael awoke with the first rays of sun that infiltrated through the cracks in the window, his body sore from the night spent in the armchair. For a moment, he thought he had dreamed of the wolves, but there they were, still asleep near the now almost extinguished fireplace. Moving silently, he got up to rekindle the fire. It was then that he noticed something unusual. A piece of old faded fabric was stuck to the fur of the larger wolf. Carefully, he approached the animal, which opened its eyes lazily but showed no sign of aggression. Michael extended his trembling, hand and picked up the piece of cloth. The world seemed to stop for an instant. That fabric, that texture. His hands began to tremble when he recognized the unique pattern of Sarah's favorite shawl. It was impossible to mistake. She herself had embroidered small flowers in the corners, a delicate work she used to do on long winter nights. How had this piece of their history arrived here? Memories, long stored away, began to emerge. Sarah always had a special connection with the wolves of the region. In the harshest winters, she would leave food for them in a specific location in the forest, talking to them as if they were old friends. Michael always thought it was an adorable eccentricity of hers, but now, looking at these two animals in his living room, he began to question if there was something deeper in that relationship. His thoughts were interrupted by firm knocks on the door. The wolves immediately became alert, their postures tense but not aggressive. Michael tucked the piece of fabric into his pocket and went to answer. Outside, a young woman, equipped with clothes appropriate for the extreme cold and a backpack on her back, stared at him with a mixture of determination and curiosity. "Good morning. I'm Emily Parker, biologist from the Mountain Wolf Preservation Project," she introduced herself, her breath forming small clouds in the frosty air. "I'm tracking 2 wolves that disappeared a few days ago. They're very important for our research." And she stopped talking abruptly, her eyes fixed on the footprints in the snow that led to the cabin door. Before Michael could respond, a sound coming from inside the cabin caught both their attention. The wolves had risen and were now approaching the door, their movements deliberate and precise. The larger one, the one that carried the piece of Sarah's shawl, fixed its gaze on Michael in a way that seemed almost human. Emily held her breath as she saw the animals. "It's them," she whispered, her voice a mixture of relief and amazement. "But it's incredible. They seem so at ease here. Normally, they're extremely wary of humans." The larger wolf let out a low, insistent growl, moving towards the door. Its companion immediately followed, and both stopped at the threshold, looking back as if expecting the humans to accompany them. Michael felt a shiver run down his spine. There was urgency in that behavior, as if the wolves wanted to show them something. "They want us to follow them," Emily spoke, already adjusting her backpack. "In all my years of research, I've never seen anything like this." Michael hesitated only for a moment, his hand unconsciously touching the piece of the shawl in his pocket. Something bigger was happening here, something that went beyond immediate comprehension. Sarah always said that nothing was by chance, that the universe had its own ways of weaving the threads of destiny. Quickly, he put on his heaviest coat and grabbed a flashlight. The snow had decreased, but the sky was still heavy, promising more precipitation. The wolves waited patiently, their eyes shining with an intelligence that defied explanation. When Michael and Emily began to move, they took the lead, guiding them along a path that delved into the snow-covered forest. The snow crunched under their feet as Michael and Emily followed the wolves deeper into the forest. The icy air burned their lungs, and with each step the trail became more challenging. The animals moved with impressive determination, occasionally stopping to ensure their human followers weren't falling behind. Emily observed everything with attentive eyes, her notebook forgotten in her jacket pocket in the face of the singularity of the situation. "These 2 are part of a very special pack," she explained as they walked. "They're the only ones we've been able to document maintaining a fixed territory for so many generations. It's as if they have an ancestral connection to this region." Michael felt the piece of the shawl weighing in his pocket. He wanted to tell Emily about Sarah, about how she used to feed the wolves years ago, about how she seemed to understand them in a way he had never fully comprehended, but the words got stuck in his throat. Some stories needed the right moment to be told. The larger wolf which led the group stopped abruptly. Its companion approached and both began to sniff the air intensely. A low sound, almost imperceptible, reached the human's ears, a weak whimper, laden with pain. The wolves moved quickly towards a partially vegetation-covered bank. Emily was the first to understand. "There's something down there," she whispered, already preparing a rope from her backpack. Michael approached the edge cautiously, and his heart almost stopped. Among branches and stones partially covered by snow, a wolf pup was shaking violently. It was trapped in a natural depression in the terrain, unable to climb the steep and frozen walls. The adult wolves were agitated at the edge of the bank, their eyes fixed on the pup. Their behavior now made sense. It wasn't by chance that they had sought help. Somehow, they had understood that they would need human assistance to rescue the little one. "We need to act fast," Emily assessed the situation with experienced eyes. "It won't last much longer in this cold." She began to prepare a safety system with the rope. But Michael was already moving. Something inside him was driving him, a force that went beyond reason. Carefully, he began to descend the bank, feeling the unstable ice under his feet. The wolves watched in silence, their presences like attentive guardians. As he approached the pup, Michael could see its condition better. It was exhausted, its half-closed eyes struggling to remain open. The moment his hands touched the small, trembling body of the pup, something strange happened. An inexplicable warmth spread through his chest, and for a brief instant, he had the impression of smelling Sarah's perfume, that unique mixture of lavender and coffee that always accompanied her. That was when the ground began to give way under his feet. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. Michael felt the terrain slip, and his body began to lean backward. The pup was safe in his arms, but he himself was about to fall. It was then that he felt it, firm teeth grabbing his jacket, preventing his fall. The larger wolf had silently approached the edge and, with impressive strength, was holding him. Emily quickly threw the rope, and with her help and that of the wolves, Michael managed to return to the surface, the pup protected inside his coat. The adult animals immediately approached, sniffing the little one and emitting soft sounds that seemed like relief. The moment of celebration, however, was brief. The wind began to increase and dark clouds were rapidly approaching. Emily looked at the sky with concern. "A storm is coming," she warned, "and by the looks of it, it's going to be strong." Michael knew she was right. Years of living in the mountains had taught him to recognize the signs. They needed to get back to the cabin as quickly as possible, but the pup needed immediate care. That's when he noticed something peculiar. The adult wolves showed no intention of taking back the pup. On the contrary, they seemed to be waiting for the humans to take the lead. "They trust us," Emily murmured, amazed. "It's as if they know we can help." Michael nodded, feeling the weight of that trust. As they began the journey back, with the first snowflakes of the storm beginning to fall, he couldn't help but think of Sarah. She always said that wolves were wiser than humans imagined, that they held secrets that went beyond rational understanding. The storm intensified with frightening speed. The wind howled between the trees, transforming the snow into icy needles that lashed their faces. Michael kept the pup firmly protected inside his coat, feeling its small heart beating against his chest. Emily walked right behind, while the adult wolves flanked the group, their robust bodies serving as natural shields against the cutting wind. The way back seemed unrecognizable under the white curtain of the storm. Each step was a battle against the elements, and visibility had been reduced to a few meters. That's when Emily tripped on a root hidden by the snow, falling heavily. "My ankle," she groaned, trying to get up. The wolf with silver patches immediately approached, offering its body as support. Michael observed that surreal scene, a wild wolf voluntarily helping an injured human. It was as if all the books on animal behavior he had ever read were wrong. With difficulty, they managed to resume walking. The pup had stopped shaking, warmed by Michael's body heat, but its breathing was weak. Emily limped, supported by both the wolf and an improvised branch as a cane. The storm continued to worsen, and night was beginning to fall, making everything even more dangerous. It was in this moment of desperation that Michael felt that scent again, lavender and coffee. It was impossible, he knew, in the midst of that snowstorm to smell any fragrance so delicate, but it was there, as real as the weight of the pup in his arms. And then, as if guided by an invisible force, he knew exactly which direction to take. "This way," he shouted to be heard above the wind. The wolves immediately responded to his voice, aligning themselves with the new direction. Emily didn't question, trusting his instinct. After what seemed like an eternity, the silhouette of the cabin finally emerged from the white curtain. Never had those rustic walls looked so welcoming. With their last strength they managed to enter, closing the door against the fury of the storm. The interior was freezing, the fireplace long extinguished. Michael quickly passed the pup to Emily and busied himself with rekindling the fire. The adult wolves approached their offspring, forming a protective circle around it, sharing body heat. As the flames began to grow, bringing life back to the environment, Emily examined the pup with professional knowledge. "It's going to be okay," she finally declared. "It's dehydrated and exhausted, but there are no serious injuries. It's a true miracle." Michael observed the scene, feeling a strange emotion growing in his chest. The piece of Sarah's shawl was still in his pocket, and he carefully removed it. Emily noticed the movement, and her eyes widened as she saw the fabric. "That pattern," she murmured, leaning to see better. "I've seen something similar in the project archives. There was a woman, years ago, who documented the first peaceful contact with this pack. She wore a shawl like this in the photographs." Michael's heart stopped for a moment. "Sarah," he whispered. "My wife." Emily looked at him with a new understanding. "Sarah Anderson. She's a legend in the project. Her records on wolf behavior were revolutionary. She was the first to suggest that this specific pack had a differentiated intelligence, a unique capacity for connection with humans." Emily's words echoed through the cabin while the storm roared outside. Michael looked at the wolves, at the pup that was beginning to recover, at the piece of fabric in his hands. All the pieces were starting to fit together. The wolves' behavior, their search for help, the way they had guided him through the storm. "Sarah always said they were special," Michael spoke, his voice choked with emotion, "that they held secrets we couldn't understand. I never really understood what she meant. Until now." The larger wolf raised its head at the sound of Michael's voice, its amber eyes shining in the firelight. There was something in that look, an ancient wisdom, an understanding that transcended the barriers between species. It was the same look that Sarah described in her diaries, the same that had captivated her so many years ago. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll continue. The storm continued through the night, transforming the cabin into an island of warmth and life amidst the white chaos. Emily had improvised a small bed for the pup near the fireplace, using old blankets. The adult wolves took turns between watching over their offspring and observing the humans with a curiosity that bordered on the supernatural. Michael rummaged through an old wooden box he had retrieved from the attic. Inside were Sarah's research diaries, documents he had never had the courage to open after her departure. His hands trembled slightly as he leafed through the yellowed pages, covered by his wife's delicate and precise handwriting. "Here," he said, extending one of the notebooks to Emily. "Sarah began documenting this specific pack 15 years ago. She believed they were different from other wolves in the region." Emily took the diary with reverence, her eyes shining with academic excitement. As she read, her expression changed from professional interest to amazement. "This is incredible," she murmured. "She wasn't just studying the wolves, she was establishing real communication with them. Look at this. She documented behavior patterns that defy everything we know about wild wolves." Michael continued to explore the diaries, discovering page after page of detailed observations, theories, and more surprisingly, personal stories. Sarah didn't just document the wolves' behavior, she built relationships with them, learned their individual habits, gave them names based on their personalities. "Silver Star," Emily read aloud, looking at the wolf with silver patches. "Sarah described him when he was still a pup. And this other one," she pointed to the larger wolf with dark fur. "She called him Guardian. They're the same ones, Michael. These wolves are direct descendants of the ones Sarah studied." The larger wolf, Guardian, raised his head at hearing the name, his ears moving attentively. Michael felt a lump in his throat. It was as if Sarah was there, whispering through the pages of her diaries, revealing secrets he had never fully understood. "She knew," Michael spoke, his voice choked with emotion. "Sarah always knew there was something special happening here." It wasn't just scientific research, it was something deeper. He stopped at a specific page where Sarah had written with a visible urgency in the pressure of the pen against the paper. The wolves are not just objects of study. They are guardians of an ancient wisdom, of a connection that we humans have long forgotten. They choose whom to trust, to whom to reveal their secrets, and when they do, it's not by chance. Each encounter has a purpose, each look carries a message. Michael doesn't believe me when I say this, but I know that one day he will understand. Wolves have their own way of teaching, of healing. Emily observed the pup, which now slept peacefully. It's exactly what happened today, she reflected. They didn't seek help by chance. They came to you, Michael, among all. The cabins in the mountains, they chose yours. Michael touched the piece of the shawl in his pocket, feeling its familiar texture. Sarah's words in her diaries seemed to gain new meaning. His wife wasn't just studying the wolves, she was discovering an ancient language, a form of communication that went beyond words. The pup moved in its sleep, letting out a small whimper. Immediately, Silver Star approached, gently touching the pup with his muzzle. The gesture was so full of affection, so deeply familiar, that Michael felt his heart tighten. It was the same kind of care that Sarah showed for everything she loved, gentle, protective, unconditional. The project archives show that this pack never left the region, Emily commented, still leafing through the diaries. Even when other packs migrated due to climate changes or human pressure, they remained. It's as if they were guarding something, or waiting. Michael looked out the window, where the storm was beginning to subside. The first rays of dawn were beginning to tinge the sky with a pale pink, transforming the snow into a blanket of diamonds. Nature had its own cycles, its own forms of healing. Sarah always knew this. And now, through these wolves, through her words preserved in time, she was teaching him too. The dawn brought with it a transformed world. The storm had ceased, leaving behind an almost sacred silence, broken only by the soft crackling of the fireplace. The pup had recovered significantly during the night, now playing timidly with a piece of rope under the watchful eye of its protectors. Emily was finishing making some notes in her field notebook, occasionally consulting Sarah's diaries for references. "The rehabilitation center isn't far from here," she commented, observing the pup. "We can take it there for complete exams, ensure it's really okay." Michael nodded, knowing it was the best thing to do, even though a part of him wanted to keep that magical moment forever. The adult wolves seemed to understand the conversation. Their gazes alternated between the pup and the humans, with an almost palpable understanding. As they prepared to leave, Michael gathered some of Sarah's diaries in a bag. They weren't just scientific records now. They were a legacy, a bridge between worlds that he was finally beginning to understand. Emily was right. Sarah was a legend in the project, not just for her discoveries, but for her ability to see beyond appearances, to understand a language that most people had forgotten. The sun was already high when they left the cabin, the pup safely accommodated in an improvised carrier. The snow sparkled with 1,000,000 diamonds, and the air was clean and crisp. The adult wolves followed them at a respectful distance, their paws leaving perfectly marked trails in the fresh snow. "You know," Emily spoke as they walked, "in recent years, we've been documenting an increase in cases of cooperation between different species in the mountains. It's as if the environment was teaching us something about connection, about the importance of transcending barriers to survive." Michael smiled, thinking about how happy Sarah would be to hear this. She always insisted that nature had its own forms of wisdom, that animals understood truths that humans had lost in their pursuit of progress. When they arrived at the rehabilitation center, a surprise awaited them. The place was exactly as Sarah had described in her last diaries, a sanctuary dedicated not only to the preservation of wildlife, but to the study and understanding of the complex relationships between all creatures of the mountains. "We want you to participate in the project, Michael," Emily spoke while the veterinarians examined the pup. "Your connection with these wolves combined with Sarah's records, this could open new paths of research, of understanding." Michael observed through the window as Guardian and Silver Star patiently waited outside, their majestic silhouettes against the white of the snow. They were no longer just wolves to him. They were messengers, guardians of an ancient wisdom that Sarah had begun to unravel. "I accept," he responded, feeling a certainty he hadn't experienced in years. Sarah always said that each encounter has a purpose. Now I understand that she was right. When the pup was released, already recovered and full of energy, the adult wolves approached to receive it. But before departing, Guardian turned one last time to Michael. His amber eyes met his, and in that moment, Michael felt a deep connection, an understanding that went beyond words. The wolf slightly raised his head, in a gesture that seemed like recognition, before guiding his small family back to the forest. Michael watched them leave, the piece of Sarah's shawl secure in his pocket, a tangible reminder that some bonds transcend time and human understanding. "Welcome to the project," Emily smiled, handing him a folder with official documents. Sarah would be proud. Michael nodded, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. The mountains remained the same, covered in snow and mystery, but something inside him had changed profoundly. Sarah always knew that wolves had the power to transform lives, not through words or grandiose actions, but through those silent connections that touch the soul. As he walked back to his cabin, now with a new purpose, Michael could swear he smelled the scent of lavender and coffee in the air and smiled. Some stories have no end, they just transform like the seasons, like the snow that melts to give way to new flowers, like love that finds different ways to continue existing. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the journey of Michael, Sarah, and the mountain wolves has touched your hearts. To continue exploring equally moving stories about the mysterious connections between humans and nature, we've prepared a special playlist that you can find by clicking on the link to the left. If this story awakened something in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like. Every day we bring new narratives that explore the hidden magic in everyday life. Share with us in the comments your own stories of inexplicable connections with nature. Until next time.